Most people treat communication as something automatic, almost like breathing. It feels so natural that they never stop to examine it. They assume that talking to people is just part of life, something that happens on its own, something that does not need structure, intention, or skill. But that casual attitude costs people far more than they realize, because in real life, almost every meaningful opportunity comes through other human beings. New projects come through people, business comes through people, partnerships, trust, introductions, support, deals, advice, growth, all of it comes through people. And if you want more of those opportunities to enter your life, then you cannot afford to communicate carelessly. You have to learn how to build communication intentionally. I am not talking about those moments when you are simply joking around with friends, relaxing, laughing, and enjoying yourself. Although even there, if we are being honest, that kind of interaction still has a purpose. Maybe the purpose is rest. Maybe it is emotional connection. Maybe it is to recharge, to feel lighter, to share joy. So even casual communication has a function. But what I really want to talk about is the kind of communication that changes your life. The kind that can open doors, attract people, create momentum, and lead to something bigger. And the first thing you need to understand is simple. Before you talk to anyone, you need to know why you are talking to them. That sounds obvious, but most people skip this completely. They go into meetings, events, dinners, conferences, and random introductions without ever defining the point of the interaction. Then later they wonder why the conversation went nowhere, why they felt awkward, or why they missed an opportunity they only recognized after it was gone. So before you walk into any meaningful interaction, ask yourself one question. Why am I going? Why do I want this conversation? Why am I meeting this person? If someone invites you somewhere, or if you are planning to approach someone yourself, or even if you are attending an event where you may meet useful people, you need clarity before you arrive. Let's say you are going to a wedding. On the surface, the reason may be emotional and personal. You are there to support a friend or family member on an important day. That is real, and that is enough. But at the same time, you also know there will be many people in that room, and with many people comes interaction. So even in situations that are not purely business, it helps to define your inner intention. Especially in professional settings, this becomes critical. If, for example, you are trying to launch a new project and you are looking for the right partner, then you should enter that environment already tuned to notice the kind of people who could realistically fit that role. Communication becomes much more powerful when it is not random. Some people hear this and immediately become uncomfortable. They think that if every conversation has to have a purpose, then communication will become robotic, cold, or manipulative. But that is not what I mean. I am not saying you should turn into a machine that calculates every word. I'm talking about environments where outcomes matter. Business settings, conferences, meetings, networking events, situations where a conversation may lead to a client, a partnership, an investment, a collaboration, or a real opportunity. In those moments, being intentional is not inhuman. It is responsible, and if we are honest, most people have already experienced the pain of not being ready. Almost everyone has had a moment where they were suddenly asked, "So what do you do?" Or "What exactly are you working on?" And instead of answering clearly, they stumbled. They rambled. They gave a vague, messy response. They knew afterward that they could have said it better. Many people have also had the experience of spending a long time talking to someone, only to realize later that the conversation went nowhere, even though that same interaction could have led to a useful project, a shared idea, or something practical. The time was there, the person was there, the chance was there, but because the conversation had no direction, the moment burned away and left nothing behind. That is why the first thing is purpose. Then comes the second question. Who exactly should you be talking to? Once you know why you want to communicate, the next step is deciding with whom that communication makes sense. This is where people lose a lot of energy. They talk to everyone and no one. They drift. They confuse activity with movement. But different goals require different people. If you are searching for a business partner, then talking endlessly to random people with no relevance to that goal will not help you. Your energy has to be selective. The right conversation with the right person is worth more than 50 pleasant but directionless interactions. That does not mean you should become arrogant or dismissive. It simply means that clarity saves time. If your goal is specific, then the people around that goal should become more visible to you. Then comes the next layer. What should you talk about? This is another place where people fail, because they think good communication is supposed to be spontaneous all the time. But in important situations, you need at least a mental framework, not a script in the stiff, unnatural sense, more like a structure. You need to know how you will introduce yourself, how you will move from light conversation into meaningful conversation, how you will create curiosity, and how you will explain what you are doing in a concise, attractive way when the opening appears. So many people walk into events with no internal blueprint. Then they randomly meet exactly the kind of person they had been hoping to meet. Maybe it is in an elevator, maybe in a hallway, maybe over coffee between sessions, maybe in the lobby of a business center. And suddenly they are face to face with someone who could genuinely become a client, a partner, an investor, or an ally. But because they have no structure in their head, they begin talking in a scattered way. They jump between thoughts. They over-explain. They fail to create interest. Then the elevator door opens. The person leaves, and the chance is gone. Not because the opportunity wasn't real, but because the communication had no architecture. So before you enter important spaces, hold in your mind a simple model of the conversation you may need to have. Know how to begin. Know what to emphasize. Know what kind of hook naturally invites the other person to ask more. And when they do, be ready with a short, clear, engaging explanation of who you are, what you do, and what kind of connection or result you are looking for. But there is another layer of communication that is even more powerful, and most people never consciously use it. This is not about posture, eye contact, smiling, or sounding confident, although those things matter. This is about something deeper. It is about the invisible role you assign to the other person in your mind before the conversation fully begins. Human beings are far more role-driven than they realize. People like predictability. In fact, trust is built on predictability. When someone behaves in a way that feels consistent, we relax around them. But when their behavior is chaotic, contradictory, or suddenly strange, we instinctively pull back. We lose trust. Society even labels highly unpredictable people as unstable or difficult. So here is the interesting part. Most people operate inside roles, whether they notice it or not. In one setting, someone is acting as a strict executive. In another, the same person becomes a warm friend. With one person, they speak formally. With another, their whole tone changes. Their face changes. Their speed changes. Their vocabulary changes. You can watch this happen in real time. A person may be stiff and official one moment. Then an old friend walks in, and suddenly they soften, smile, shorten names, relax their body, and become someone else entirely. What changed? The role changed. That means communication is not only about content, it is about what role is being activated inside the interaction. And this is where things become very useful. When you speak to someone, you can silently place them into a role that benefits the conversation. You can treat them, from the very beginning, not as a threat, not as a cold authority figure, not as a stranger you have to impress, but as a decent person, a trustworthy person, a fair person, even an old familiar ally. If you do this sincerely, your own tone changes, your face changes, your energy changes, your words change, your smile becomes different, the entire emotional temperature of the interaction shifts, and the other person feels it immediately, even if they cannot explain why. In many cases, they begin unconsciously stepping into the role you have handed them. If you treat someone like a good, honest, open-hearted person, very often they begin behaving more like one. Not because of magic, but because human beings respond to the social expectations placed on them. We are constantly mirroring, adjusting, and playing back what we sense from the other side. This is why role perception is so powerful. It changes not only how you see the person, it changes who they become inside the interaction. Think about something very simple. Imagine you are stopped by a police officer or any person representing authority. That person arrives wearing the identity of the role, the uniform, the posture, the formal tone, the institutional presence. All of it communicates distance and control. Most people instantly respond with tension. But suppose instead of reacting only to the uniform, you choose internally to see the human being underneath it as someone who is capable of kindness, fairness, and understanding. Suppose your tone reflects that. Suppose you speak not as if you are confronting a machine, but as if you are speaking to a decent, responsive human being. Very often, you will notice the tone on the other side begin to soften. The coldness drops. The voice becomes more human. The interaction becomes less rigid. The energy shifts. That is not accidental. That is role transformation happening in real time. And once you begin noticing this, you realize how often it works. It works with strangers. It works in business. It works in negotiations. It works in service interactions. It works in tension. It works in everyday life. People often become more like the version of themselves that you consistently call forward. So here is a useful exercise. The next time you meet someone you do not know, before the conversation fully unfolds, mentally assign them a role that helps the interaction. See them as a good person. See them as trustworthy. See them as cooperative. See them as warm. Then speak to them from that assumption and watch what happens in return. Pay close attention to how their voice changes, how their face changes, how the distance between you changes. You may be surprised by how often the other person begins to meet you inside the role you created for them. Communication is not just talking, it is direction, it is selection, it is structure, it is intention. And very often, it is the subtle art of bringing out the best possible version of the person in front of you. When you learn to do that, communication stops being random noise and starts becoming one of the most powerful tools in your life.